There comes a moment when silence becomes louder than screaming, when walking away becomes the most powerful sentence you'll ever speak, and when the goodbye you give is the lesson they never expected. For years, we are taught that leaving should be gentle, polite, explained, wrapped neatly in soft words so no one feels uncomfortable. But what if the person you're leaving has fed on your softness? What if they've stretched your compassion into chains? What if every time you tried to speak up, they twisted your words, mocked your courage, or told you that you were too emotional? There is a specific kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when you've been surviving someone who only pretends to love you. It's the fatigue that comes from being gaslit, minimized, dismissed, blamed, and emotionally drained. You start to shrink. You start to doubt your worth. You start to apologize for existing. And in that moment, right when you think you've lost yourself for good, something inside you whispers, no more. Walking away in a way that hurts isn't about cruelty. It's about clarity. It's about reclaiming your voice, your dignity, your boundaries, your truth. It's about giving a goodbye that isn't wrapped in explanations or defenses, because you finally understand that people who choose to misunderstand you will never listen anyway. Leaving becomes an act of self-respect, a declaration of emotional freedom, a moment where your heart decides it deserves oxygen again. You don't slam the door out of rage. You close it gently because you're done. You walk away silently because you've learned enough. And that silence, that's what stings them the most. When you finally decide to leave someone who feeds on control, something incredible happens inside you. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop begging someone to value your heart. And that shift, the unapologetic shift, is what breaks them more than the goodbye itself. Because people who rely on power games expect you to plead, to negotiate, to soften your exit so they can feel relevant. They expect you to be the one who trembles, the one who hesitates, the one who keeps checking if they're okay. But the moment you stop doing that, the moment you own your voice without shaking, something in them cracks. Your goodbye isn't cruel, it's clean. Your departure isn't dramatic, it's decisive. Your silence isn't punishment, it's protection. The truth is, you've already left emotionally long before you physically walk away. You left the day they dismissed your pain. You left the moment they mocked your needs. You left each time they accused you of being too sensitive when all you wanted was honesty, reciprocity, and compassion. So when you finally gather the strength to say, I'm done, you're not abandoning them, you're returning to yourself. You no longer seek closure from someone who has never taken responsibility. You no longer wait for an apology that will never come. You no longer shrink so they can feel tall. And when you walk out with your shoulders lifted and your heart steady, they feel it. They feel the loss of the control they thought they had. They feel the weight of the silence they didn't expect. They feel the consequence of losing someone who truly cared. Leaving in a way that hurts isn't about revenge. It's about finally choosing yourself without guilt. There's a moment after you leave, a moment of stillness that feels almost unreal. For the first time in a long time, no one is talking over you. No one is twisting your words. No one is questioning your intentions or weaponizing your emotions. It's just quiet. And in that quiet, you begin to hear something you haven't heard in years, your own truth. People who thrive on control fear one thing more than confrontation: your absence. Because your absence is something they can't manipulate, argue with, or overpower. You see, when you were there, explaining, defending, trying, they always had access to you. Access to your empathy, access to your forgiveness, access to the parts of you that made them feel powerful. But when you walk away fully, and you do it without theatrics, without shouting, without one last emotional breakdown, that's when the reality hits them. Your absence becomes the mirror they can't escape. They replay moments not because they feel love, but because they feel the loss of control. They remember your softness, not with gratitude, but with panic, because your softness was their leverage. They scroll through your silence like it's a message they can't decode. They talk to themselves in circles, trying to understand how you slipped through the grip they thought was unbreakable. And while they're spiraling, you're learning to breathe again. You discover that peace doesn't feel foreign. You were just kept too busy surviving to recognize it. You notice that your shoulders sit a little higher, your voice sounds a little steadier, and your heart beats without fear waiting for the next emotional ambush. This is the part they never expect. Your absence doesn't weaken you. It rebuilds you. And nothing threatens a controlling person more than the strength you find once you're gone. There's a shift that happens, not in them, but in you. A shift so profound, so steady, so quietly powerful that it ripples through everything. It's the moment you stop looking over your shoulder. The moment you stop hoping they'll change. The moment you stop feeling guilty for choosing peace over chaos. And that moment is exactly when they feel the ground beneath them shake. Because people who thrive on control always count on one thing: your return, your forgiveness, your emotional softness, your willingness to give them one more chance. But when your goodbye is real, when it comes from a place of deep clarity instead of temporary frustration, they sense it. Not instantly, but slowly, painfully. Like a truth seeping into their bones, they start reaching out, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of losing access to your empathy. Fear of losing the emotional supply you provided. Fear of facing the emptiness that your presence used to fill. They try the same patterns: the guilt, the sweet words, the sudden kindness. The promise is wrapped in recycled lies, but something in you no longer bends. Their words no longer pierce. Their charm no longer disorients. You hear them, but you don't feel them anymore. And that is the most terrifying thing for someone who has relied on your emotional responsiveness. What hurts them isn't your anger, it's your neutrality, not your tears, but your calm, not your departure, but your certainty. They realize you're not coming back when they see that the door you closed wasn't slammed in pain, it was sealed in wisdom. And once that realization hits, it's a wound to their ego they can't hide, heal, or erase. Leaving someone who feeds on control isn't just about walking away from them, it's about walking back to yourself. Because long before you said goodbye, pieces of you had been slipping away quietly, unnoticed, buried under the weight of surviving someone who demanded more than they ever gave. There's a part of you that forgot how to speak without being interrupted. A part of you that stopped dreaming because every dream was mocked or minimized. A part of you that stopped expressing needs because needs were turned into weaknesses. A part of you that dimmed your light so their insecurity could stay comfortable. But the moment you leave, truly leave, those pieces begin to rise. At first, it feels unfamiliar, almost frightening. You're relearning how to trust your own voice. You're realizing your instincts were right all along. You're remembering that your feelings were never too much. They were simply inconvenient for someone who didn't want accountability. And as you pick up those lost parts, something powerful happens. You begin to recognize yourself again. You start noticing small shifts. You laugh without checking who's watching. You rest without feeling guilty. You speak without bracing for backlash. You wake up without preparing for emotional war. These moments of rediscovery are quiet but monumental. They rebuild you from the inside out. And here's the truth they never wanted you to know. You were never hard to love. You were simply with someone incapable of loving in a healthy way. Reclaiming yourself isn't just healing, it's liberation. It's the moment you step into the version of you that survived the pain, learned from it, and grew beyond it. And the more you rise, the more they realize they didn't just lose you, they lost access to the person they thought they could control forever. There's a kind of freedom that feels almost unreal at first. A freedom so light, so clean, so unburdened that your body doesn't quite know how to process it. This freedom arrives the moment you walk away from someone who relied on your captivity, not physical captivity, but emotional, psychological, and spiritual restraint. When you leave someone who feeds on control, you begin to experience life without the constant background noise of tension. Your nervous system, once wired for survival, starts to exhale. You're no longer waiting for the mood swings. You're no longer anticipating the criticism. You're no longer bracing for the unpredictable storms they called love. This piece isn't quiet, it's loud. It echoes inside you. And the person who once tried to control your reality, they feel that shift from afar. Because the one thing they never wanted you to taste was freedom, not real freedom. Not the kind that makes you glow, breathe, and expand. They didn't want you to realize you deserve more. They didn't want you to see that life didn't have to hurt. They didn't want you to understand that love isn't supposed to break you. Because the moment you understand these truths, you become unreachable to them. Your freedom exposes their limitations. Your healing exposes their wounds. Your growth exposes their stagnation. And the more you enjoy your peace, the more they unravel. Not because they miss you, but because they miss the control they once had over you. Your joy becomes the one thing they cannot touch. Your calm becomes the one thing they cannot poison. Your life becomes the one thing they cannot interrupt. Freedom is the goodbye they never see coming, and the one they never recover from. There comes a moment in your healing when you look back at everything they used to do. The manipulation, the guilt traps, the silent treatments, the fake tears, the sudden affection, and you realize none of it works on you anymore. Not because they changed, but because you did. This is the moment they fear the most. Because their power was never real, it only existed as long as you believed their version of reality over your own. Now, you see through the tactics that once kept you emotionally tied to them. When they guilt trip you, you no longer crumble. When they play the victim, you no longer rush to save them. When they criticize you, you no longer internalize the shame. When they offer fake apologies, you no longer soften. When they try to provoke you, you no longer engage. It's not that you've become cold, it's that you've become aware. Awareness is the kryptonite to manipulation. Once your eyes open, you cannot unsee the truth. You cannot unknow the patterns. You cannot pretend their chaos is love. And that terrifies them. Because your emotional distance isn't anger, it's evolution. Your silence isn't punishment, it's self-respect. Your boundaries aren't walls, they're protection. They try everything they once used to keep you in their orbit. They push, they tempt, they provoke, they promise, they perform. And yet nothing reaches you. You've outgrown the version of yourself they could control. You've stepped into a strength they never expected. You've reclaimed your identity, your power, your voice. And the moment they realize their games no longer work, that's the moment they finally understand. They've lost you for good. Silence is not empty. Silence is not passive. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the language of someone who has finally learned the difference between fixing and protecting, between love and attachment, between being needed and being used. When you leave someone who thrives on chaos, the one thing that disarms them completely is your silence. Not the silent treatment they used to manipulate you with, but the silence born from clarity, closure, and emotional maturity. Your silence says what words never could. I'm no longer belong in your chaos. I am no longer available for your manipulation. I don't need to prove anything to you anymore. I choose peace over winning an argument. I am done explaining my worth. They hear that silence louder than every tear you ever cried, louder than every argument, louder than every plea for them to do better. Because silence means you're no longer emotionally invested. And for someone who fed on your emotional reactions, that is the deepest cut. They check their phone. They replay old conversations. They craft messages they delete and rewrite. They wait for a response that never comes. And the more silent you stay, the more they unravel. Because silence reveals the truth about the relationship they built. It only survived as long as you kept pouring, explaining, justifying, and forgiving. Your silence is not cruel. It is sacred. It is the boundary they never thought you would enforce. It is the closure you gave yourself because you finally realized they would never give it to you. And in that silence, you don't lose anything, You reclaim everything. There's a version of you that only reveals itself after you walk away, a version they never saw coming, a version they never believed would exist without them, a version they quietly hoped you would never grow into. But here you are evolving. This version of you doesn't break the way you used to. You don't chase closure anymore. You don't search for validation in the eyes of someone who never valued your heart. You don't shrink yourself to keep the peace. You don't silence your needs to protect someone else's ego. You rise. You start making choices based on what you want, not what keeps them comfortable. You begin to rebuild your life with intention instead of fear. You reconnect with the dreams you abandoned while trying to earn someone's love. You reclaim your energy, your self-worth, your confidence. And the most powerful part, you no longer apologize for your strength. They see your glow returning. They see opportunities opening for you. They see people appreciating the qualities they dismissed. They see you becoming someone who is no longer accessible to their chaos. And that realization cuts deeper than any goodbye ever could, because what they never understood is this: you were never weak. You were never broken. You were never too emotional or too sensitive. You were simply giving your heart to someone who never deserved the depth of your love. Now you stand in your power, not loudly, not aggressively, but gracefully. You become the person they didn't think you could be because they never imagined you without them. But you imagined yourself into someone stronger, wiser, and freer. Their biggest regret isn't losing you. It's realizing who you became after they were gone. And now, the final truth of leaving in a way that hurts, the ending is not about them. It is about you. You walk away not to punish, not to seek revenge, not to make them feel small. You walk away because you finally understand that your life, your peace, and your heart deserve more than constant compromise, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion. When you close that chapter, it is deliberate, it is clean, it is unwavering. They will feel it. They will notice the absence they once controlled. They will try to fill the space you left, but you are no longer available. Your boundaries, your strength, your clarity, these are your armor. And they will never penetrate it again. This goodbye is the kind that echoes long after you are gone. It teaches lessons that words never could. It communicates what explanations never did. You are free. You are whole. You are enough. The ending doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't plead for recognition. It simply exists like a sunrise that cannot be ignored, like a river that flows beyond the rocks in its path, like a soul that knows its worth. And the most important truth is this: leaving in a way that hurts is not cruelty. It is courage. It is self-respect. It is liberation. You step into the next chapter of your life carrying yourself fully, without apology, without doubt, and without fear. And the person you leave behind, well, they will finally understand what they lost. Because some goodbyes are not just endings, they are awakenings. And this one is yours